The planet Earth hung in the velvet expanse of space, a swirling orb of blues, greens, and whites. To the untrained eye, it was just another planet in the vastness of the galaxy, but to Xenia, it represented something far more profound. This world, with its rich history and diverse cultures, was her first assignment in her new role as Alien Miss Universe, a title she wore like an ornate crown that had begun to feel too heavy. As her spacecraft descended through Earth's atmosphere, Xenia gazed out at the planet below. The view was breathtaking, even for someone who had seen the wonders of 1,000 worlds. Clouds swirled like delicate strokes of paint across a canvas of deep blue oceans, while vast landmasses spread out beneath them, dotted with the lights of countless cities. It was a world teeming with life, with stories she was eager to explore. Xenia had always been a curious soul. On Zalera, her home planet, curiosity was both a virtue and a necessity. Zalarians were known throughout the galaxy for their beauty, but also for their wisdom and grace. Her people had long ago mastered the arts of diplomacy and peace, becoming one of the most respected civilizations in the known universe. Yet, despite all her planet had to offer, Xenia had always felt a yearning for something more, something she couldn't quite name. The spacecraft touched down gently in a secluded area just outside one of Earth's major cities. As the door hissed open, Xenia took a deep breath, savoring the cool, crisp air of this alien world. The sky above was a brilliant blue, dotted with soft, fluffy clouds. A light breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the earthy scent of pine and the distant hum of life. It was a sensory experience unlike any she had encountered before, and she found herself momentarily lost in the simple beauty of it. A small delegation of Earth officials awaited her at the base of the ramp. Among them was a man who stood slightly apart from the rest, his posture relaxed but attentive. He wore a simple gray suit, unremarkable by Earth standards, but it was his demeanor that caught Xenia's attention. He seemed calm, almost serene, amidst the flurry of activity around him. When their eyes met, he offered a small, genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. "Welcome to Earth," Ambassador Xenia said, one of the officials, a woman with sharp features and a practiced smile. "We are honored to have you here." "Thank you," Xenia replied, her voice smooth and melodic, carrying the slightest hint of an accent that marked her as otherworldly. "It is an honor to be here." The woman gestured to the man standing behind her. "This is Dr. Ethan Brooks, one of our leading scientists in space exploration technology. He has been assigned to be your guide during your stay on Earth." Ethan stepped forward, extending a hand in greeting. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ambassador," he said, his tone warm and unpretentious. Xenia hesitated for the briefest of moments before taking his hand. On Zalara, physical contact was rare, reserved for only the most intimate of connections, but Earth customs were different, and she was determined to immerse herself fully in this experience. Ethan's hand was warm, his grip firm yet gentle, and she found herself oddly comforted by the contact. "The pleasure is mine, Doctor," Brooks, she responded, her gaze lingering on his for a moment longer than necessary. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite place, that intrigued her. Ethan released her hand and gestured towards a sleek, black vehicle waiting nearby. "Shall we? There's much to see, and I'm eager to show you around." As they made their way to the vehicle, Xenia couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was more than just another diplomatic mission. There was something about Earth, about this moment, that felt different. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The vehicle hummed to life as they settled inside, the interior plush and comfortable. Ethan took the driver's seat, and as they pulled away from the landing site, Xenia took in her surroundings with wide eyes. They were driving through what appeared to be a forested area, the trees towering above them like ancient sentinels. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the road ahead. "Is this your first time on Earth?" Ethan asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "It is," Xenia replied, her eyes still on the scenery outside. "Though I have studied your planet extensively, there is nothing quite like experiencing it firsthand." Ethan nodded, glancing at her briefly. "I can imagine. Earth has its own unique charm, I suppose. We may not have the advanced technology or the utopian societies of other planets, but there's something special about the diversity and resilience of life here." Xenia turned her gaze to him. "Curious, you speak with such affection for your world. Have you traveled to other planets?" Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. Not yet, though I hope to one day. My work keeps me grounded here, so to speak. But I've always been fascinated by the stars, by the possibility of life beyond our own. I suppose that's why I became a scientist in the first place. There was a sincerity in his voice that resonated with Xenia. She had met countless beings across the galaxy, many of whom were jaded or cynical, their wonder lost to the routine of interstellar politics. But Ethan seemed different. His passion was palpable, and it stirred something within her. As they drove on, Ethan began to point out various features of the landscape. He spoke of the different ecosystems on Earth, the delicate balance of life that had evolved over millennia. Xenia listened intently, asking questions and offering insights from her own experiences. The conversation flowed easily between them, and Xenia found herself relaxing in his presence. Eventually, the forest gave way to open fields, and in the distance, the skyline of a sprawling city came into view. The buildings reached towards the sky, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Xenia had seen cities like this on other worlds, but there was something distinct about this one, a sense of history, of stories etched into the very foundations of the structures. "Welcome to New Metropolis," Ethan said, his voice tinged with pride. "It's one of our most advanced cities, a hub of technology and culture." As they entered the city, Xenia was struck by the vibrant energy that seemed to pulse through the streets. People of all shapes, sizes, and colors moved about, each with their own purpose. The air was filled with the sounds of life, honking horns, the murmur of conversation, the distant strains of music. It was a sensory overload, but Xenia found it exhilarating. Ethan guided the vehicle through the bustling streets, pointing out landmarks and sharing tidbits of information. They passed towering skyscrapers, each a marvel of engineering, as well as parks filled with lush greenery, offering a stark contrast to the steel and glass surrounding them. As they neared their destination, Xenia found herself reflecting on her first impressions of Earth. It was a world of contrasts, technological advancements alongside natural beauty, a chaotic energy balanced by moments of tranquility. And at the center of it all was Ethan, her guide through this new and unfamiliar terrain. The vehicle finally came to a stop in front of a grand building made of glass and steel, its design both modern and elegant. "This is the United Earth Embassy," Ethan explained. "It's where you'll be staying during your visit. It's equipped with all the amenities you might need, and there's a team here dedicated to making your stay as comfortable as possible." Xenia nodded, her thoughts still swirling from all she had seen and heard. She was grateful for the warm reception, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something more awaited her on this planet, something beyond the diplomatic duties she had come to fulfill. Ethan escorted her inside, where they were greeted by a team of Earth officials and attendants. As they went through the formalities, Xenia found her attention drifting back to Ethan. There was a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that she found comforting. He was different from anyone she had met before, unassuming, yet deeply passionate. And there was something else, something she couldn't quite name, that drew her to him. After the introductions were made and the formalities concluded, Ethan turned to Xenia with a smile. "I hope you're settling in well. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you, Doctor." Brooks, Xenia replied, returning his smile. "I appreciate your kindness." "Please call me Ethan," he said, his tone gentle. Ethan, Xenia repeated, the name feeling unfamiliar yet comforting on her tongue. "And you may call me Xenia." Ethan's smile widened. "Xenia it is, then. I look forward to showing you more of our world." As he left her to settle in, Xenia watched him go, a curious sense of anticipation stirring within her. This was only the beginning of her journey on Earth, but already she could feel the threads of destiny weaving around her, pulling her towards something unknown yet undeniable. For the first time in a long while, Xenia felt truly alive, her heart beating in sync with the vibrant pulse of the world around her. And she couldn't help but wonder what else did this strange, beautiful planet have in store for her. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the United Earth Embassy, casting a warm golden hue over the room where Xenia sat. She had risen early, her mind too restless to allow for much sleep. The events of the previous day played over in her thoughts, mingling with the excitement of what lay ahead. Earth was a planet filled with surprises, and today she was determined to uncover more of its secrets. Her quarters at the embassy were luxurious, furnished with a blend of Earth's finest materials and Xelarian touches that had been added to make her feel at home. The walls were adorned with art from various cultures around the globe, a testament to the diversity and richness of Earth's history. Yet, despite the comfort and beauty of her surroundings, Xenia felt a growing impatience. She was eager to step out into the world beyond the walls of the embassy, to experience Earth in its raw, unfiltered state. A soft chime announced a visitor, and the door slid open to reveal Ethan, standing there with his usual warm smile. He was dressed casually today, in dark jeans and a light shirt, a departure from the formal attire he had worn when they first met. The simplicity suited him, she thought, and there was an ease about him that put her immediately at ease as well. "Good morning, Xenia," he greeted, his voice carrying a note of genuine enthusiasm. "I hope you slept well." Xenia stood, smoothing out the elegant yet simple dress she had chosen for the day. "Good morning, Ethan. I didn't sleep much, but not from discomfort. I'm just eager to see more of your world." Ethan chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound that Xenia found oddly comforting. "I understand completely. There's so much to see, and I've planned a full day for us. I thought we could start with a visit to one of our museums. There's one in particular that I think you'll find fascinating." A museum. Xenia's curiosity was piqued. On Zalera, museums were rare, as her people had long preferred to pass down knowledge and history through living tradition rather than static displays. "What kind of museum?" "It's the Global Museum of Human History," Ethan explained as they walked towards the exit. "It's a place where we've tried to encapsulate the vast and complex history of our species, our triumphs, our mistakes, our evolution. It's not just about artifacts, it's about understanding who we are as a people." Xenia considered this as they stepped outside, the fresh morning air greeting them like an old friend. The embassy was located in a quiet part of the city, surrounded by lush gardens that provided a serene escape from the urban sprawl. As they made their way to the car that awaited them, Xenia took in the sights and sounds around her, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Ethan opened the door for her, and she slid into the passenger seat, her curiosity growing by the minute. As they drove through the city, Xenia couldn't help but marvel at the sheer diversity of life that surrounded them. The streets were alive with activity, people of all ages, races, and backgrounds going about their daily lives, each one a story in themselves. There were towering skyscrapers, their glass facades reflecting the morning sun, standing alongside historical buildings that spoke of a bygone era. The juxtaposition of old and new, tradition and innovation, fascinated her. "Tell me more about this museum," Xenia said as they drove. "What does it say about your people?" Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. "Well, it's not an easy question to answer. The museum covers everything from our earliest ancestors to the present day. It's a place where we confront our past, both the good and the bad. We've achieved incredible things. But we've also made terrible mistakes. The museum doesn't shy away from that. It's about learning from our history so we can build a better future." Xenia nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Her own people, the Zalarians, had a long and storied past as well, though they tended to focus on their achievements and wisdom rather than their missteps. It was an interesting contrast, one she was eager to explore further. They arrived at the museum shortly after, the building itself a striking blend of modern architecture and classical design. The entrance was flanked by grand columns, while the facade was adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes from Earth's history, warriors in battle, scholars in study, artists in creation. It was a place that demanded respect and reflection, and Xenia felt a deep sense of anticipation as they approached. Inside, the museum was a labyrinth of galleries and exhibits, each one meticulously curated to tell the story of humanity. As they moved through the different sections, Ethan explained the significance of each display. There were ancient artifacts, tools, and pottery from early civilizations, the remnants of great empires long gone. There were paintings and sculptures, masterpieces that had defined entire eras of artistic expression. And there were technological marvels, inventions that had propelled humanity forward, sometimes at great cost. Xenia was particularly drawn to an exhibit on the Industrial Revolution. It depicted the rapid technological advancements that had transformed society, but also the environmental and social consequences that had followed. "Your people have such a drive to innovate," she remarked, studying a model of an early steam engine. "But it seems that progress often comes with a price." Ethan nodded, his expression somber. "Yes, it's something we've struggled with throughout our history. We're always pushing forward, often without fully considering the long-term effects. It's only recently that we started to understand the need for balance, for sustainable growth that doesn't destroy what we have." They continued through the museum, each exhibit offering a new perspective on humanity's journey. Xenia found herself deeply moved by the stories she encountered, stories of courage, of sacrifice, of resilience in the face of unimaginable odds. She was particularly struck by a section dedicated to the world's many conflicts, from ancient wars to modern-day struggles for justice and equality. "These are the scars of your history," Xenia said quietly as they stood before a display of photographs from the civil rights movement. The images were raw and powerful, capturing moments of both brutality and profound bravery. "But they're also a testament to your people's strength." Ethan's gaze lingered on the photographs, his expression unreadable. "We've come a long way, but there's still so much work to be done. Our history is a reminder that we're capable of great cruelty, but also of great kindness. It's a balancing act, and we're still learning how to get it right." Xenia reached out, almost instinctively, and touched his arm. It was a small gesture, but it conveyed her understanding, her empathy. "Every civilization has its struggles," she said softly. "But what matters is that you keep striving to be better. That's what defines a people, not their mistakes, but their willingness to learn from them." Ethan looked at her, a glimmer of something like admiration in his eyes. "You have a way of seeing things, Xenia, a clarity that's rare." She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her at his words. "Perhaps it's easier to see clearly when you're an outsider looking in, but I think it's more than that. Your world, your people fascinate me. There's so much depth, so much complexity. I feel like I'm just beginning to scratch the surface." They moved on to a section of the museum dedicated to space exploration, a topic that sparked a new light in Ethan's eyes. He spoke with passion about the early days of space travel, the first tentative steps humanity had taken beyond their planet's atmosphere. There were models of spacecraft, photographs of distant planets and moons, and videos of astronauts floating weightlessly in the void. "This is where my heart truly lies," Ethan admitted, as they stood before a model of the International Space Station. "Exploring the unknown, pushing the boundaries of what we understand. It's what drives me, what makes me feel alive." Xenia could see the fire in his eyes, the unquenchable thirst for discovery. It was a passion she understood all too well, one that mirrored her own yearning for something beyond the life she had always known. "And what do you hope to find out there, among the stars?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's gaze turned distant, as if he were looking beyond the walls of the museum, out into the infinite expanse of space. "I don't know," he admitted. "But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The not knowing. The possibility that there's someone out there waiting to be discovered. It's what keeps me going." His words resonated deeply with Xenia. She had traveled across the galaxy, seen wonders beyond imagining, but there was always a part of her that felt unfulfilled, as if there was something more she was meant to find. Perhaps that was why Earth had drawn her in, why this planet, with all its imperfections and struggles, felt so different from any place she had ever been. Their tour of the museum ended in a grand hall that showcased humanity's hopes for the future, a future where technology and nature existed in harmony, where the lessons of the past had been learned and applied. It was an optimistic vision, one that filled Xenia with a sense of hope. As they left the museum, the sun was high in the sky, casting a bright light over the city. Xenia felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but also a growing curiosity and eagerness to see more, to understand more. Ethan had shown her a glimpse of his world, and it had only fueled her desire to delve deeper. "There's still so much to see," Ethan said as they walked back to the car. "I was thinking we could visit one of our nature reserves next. It's a place where you can see Earth's natural beauty up close, untouched by human hands." Xenia's eyes lit up at the idea. "That sounds perfect. I've always felt a connection to nature, even on my own world. There's something pure about it, something that speaks to the soul." Ethan smiled, pleased by her enthusiasm. Then it settled. "We'll head there now. It's a bit of a drive, but I think you'll find it worth the trip." As they drove out of the city, leaving the towering buildings and busy streets behind, Xenia felt a sense of anticipation building within her. The museum had given her a glimpse into the heart of humanity, but she knew there was still so much more to discover. And with Ethan by her side, she felt a growing sense of connection not just to this world, but to him. The road ahead was long and winding, cutting through forests and hills, past rivers and fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. Xenia found herself lost in thought, her mind a swirl of emotions and ideas. This planet, with all its contradictions and complexities, had awakened something within her, a desire to explore, to understand, to connect. As they neared the nature reserve, the landscape began to change. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy of green. The air became cooler, fresher, filled with the scent of pine and earth. It was a place of serenity, a world apart from the chaos of the city. They arrived at the reserve, a vast expanse of wilderness that stretched out before them, untouched and untamed. Ethan led her along a path that wound through the trees, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds. It was a place of peace, of quiet reflection, and Xenia felt a deep sense of calm settle over her. They walked in companionable silence, taking in the beauty around them. The forest was alive with color and texture, every leaf, every blade of grass a testament to the resilience and diversity of life on Earth. Xenia felt a deep connection to this place, a sense of belonging that she hadn't expected. "This is what I love most about Earth," Ethan said quietly, as if not to disturb the tranquility around them. "Places like this, where you can feel the pulse of the planet, where you can connect with something larger than yourself." Xenia nodded, understanding completely. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "There's a harmony here, a balance that feels right." They continued walking, the path leading them to a clearing that opened up to a breathtaking view. Below them, a river wound its way through the valley, its waters sparkling in the sunlight. The hills rose gently on either side, covered in a patchwork of green and gold. It was a scene that seemed almost otherworldly in its beauty, and Xenia found herself momentarily lost in its splendor. Ethan stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This is one of my favorite places," he admitted. "Whenever I need to clear my head, I come here. It reminds me of what's really important." "And what is that?" Xenia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to her, his expression earnest. "Connection. To the world, to each other. It's easy to get lost in the noise, in the chaos of life. But places like this remind me that we're all part of something bigger, something worth protecting." Xenia felt a warmth spread through her chest, a deep sense of understanding and connection. Ethan's words resonated with her, echoing the thoughts that had been swirling in her mind since she had arrived on Earth. This world, with all its beauty and complexity, had something to teach her, something that went beyond diplomacy or duty. As they stood there, side by side, Xenia felt a shift within her, a realization that her journey on Earth was not just about fulfilling her role as alien Miss Universe. It was about discovering herself, about understanding what she truly wanted, what she truly needed. And in that moment, with the sun shining down on them and the world spread out before her, Xenia knew that her journey was just beginning. There was so much more to see, so much more to learn, and she was ready to embrace it all. But more than that, she was ready to embrace the connection she felt growing between her and Ethan, a connection that felt as natural and inevitable as the river flowing through the valley below. As they began their walk back to the car, Xenia's heart was light, her mind clear. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges she couldn't yet foresee. But with Ethan by her side, she felt a strength and a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Together they would face whatever lay ahead, guided by the connection that had sparked between them, a connection that, Xenia was beginning to realize, was the very thing she had been searching for all along. The days that followed were a whirlwind of exploration, discovery, and deepening connection. Xenia and Ethan spent every moment together, visiting some of Earth's most extraordinary places and sharing conversations that delved into the very core of who they were. The more time Xenia spent with Ethan, the more she found herself drawn to him, not just as a guide to this fascinating world, but as a person who seemed to understand her in a way that no one else ever had. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Xenia found herself standing on the balcony of her quarters at the United Earth Embassy. The city below was just beginning to wake up, the streets slowly filling with people starting their day. But despite the beauty of the scene, Xenia's thoughts were elsewhere, focused on the man who had, in such a short time, become so important to her. She had never intended for this to happen. Her visit to Earth was supposed to be about diplomacy, about fostering peace and understanding between different species. Yet, as the days had passed, she had found herself thinking less and less about her duties and more about Ethan, about the way his eyes lit up when he talked about space exploration, the way he listened to her with such genuine interest, the way he treated her not as a symbol or a title, but as a person. A soft knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, a small, slightly sheepish smile on his face. He was dressed casually again, in a light jacket and jeans, and there was something about the way he looked at her that made her heart skip a beat. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "Good morning," Ethan Xenia replied, her smile mirroring his. "What brings you here so early?" "I thought we could take a walk," he said, his tone casual, but with a hint of something more beneath the surface. "There's a place not far from here that I think you'd like. It's quiet, peaceful, perfect for a morning stroll." Xenia hesitated for a moment, but the idea of spending more time with Ethan, away from the responsibilities that weighed on her, was too tempting to resist. "That sounds wonderful," she said, moving towards him. "Let me just grab my coat." Minutes later they were walking side by side through the embassy's gardens, a sprawling expanse of greenery and flowers that provided a serene escape from the bustle of the city. The air was crisp, the morning dew still clinging to the grass, and the only sounds were the chirping of birds and the soft crunch of their footsteps on the gravel path. For a while they walked in comfortable silence, the kind that spoke of a deepening bond between them. It was a silence that allowed their thoughts to flow freely, unburdened by the need for words. Xenia found herself stealing glances at Ethan, noticing the way the morning light played across his features, the way his expression softened when he thought she wasn't looking. Eventually they reached a secluded spot in the garden, a small, shaded grove surrounded by tall trees and flowering bushes. There was a stone bench in the center, and Ethan gestured for her to sit. As she did, he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "This place is beautiful," Xenia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels untouched, like a hidden sanctuary in the middle of the city." Ethan nodded, his gaze focused on the path ahead. "I come here often when I need to clear my head. There's something about being surrounded by nature that helps put things into perspective." Xenia looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion she hadn't anticipated. "I can see why you like it here," she said softly. "It's a place where you can just be. No expectations, no responsibilities, just you and your thoughts." He turned to her then, his eyes searching hers. "Exactly," he murmured. "And I wanted to share it with you, Xenia. I feel like I can be myself around you. No pretenses, no masks, just me." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Xenia felt her breath catch in her throat as she realized how much those words mirrored her own feelings. Since arriving on Earth, she had felt more like herself than she had in years, more real, more alive. And it was because of Ethan, because of the way he saw her, not as a title or a symbol, but as a person. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling slightly, But whatever she was about to say was cut off as Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. The touch was gentle, tentative, as if he was unsure of her reaction. Xenia looked down at their joined hands, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been touched before, of course, by family, by friends, even by admirers. But this was different. This was intimate, personal, and it sent a jolt of electricity through her entire body. When she looked up at him, his expression was one of vulnerability, of a man who had taken a leap of faith and was waiting to see if it would be returned. "Xenia," he said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "I know this might be too soon, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I need to tell you how I feel." Xenia's heart skipped a beat, and she found herself holding her breath, waiting for his next words. "I've never met anyone like you," he continued, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "You're kind, intelligent, curious, and so much more than just the title you carry. You've shown me a different way of seeing the world, and I've fallen for you, Xenia. I know it's complicated, and I know we come from different worlds, but I can't help how I feel." His confession hung in the air, heavy and full of possibility. Xenia felt a rush of emotion, surprise, joy, fear swirling within her. She had been drawn to Ethan from the moment they met, and as they had spent more time together, those feelings had only grown stronger. But she hadn't fully allowed herself to acknowledge them until now, hadn't dared to believe that someone like him could feel the same way about her. But now, hearing the words spoken aloud, there was no denying it. She felt the same way. More than that, she realized that Ethan had become someone she didn't want to live without, someone who made her feel more alive than she had in years. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I feel the same way." His eyes widened in surprise, and then a brilliant smile broke across his face, one that lit up his entire being. "You do?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. Zinnia nodded, her own smile matching his. "I do. I've never felt this way before, not with anyone. You've made me see the world in a new light, and I don't want to lose that." Ethan's expression softened, and he gently squeezed her hand. "You won't lose it," he said softly. "We'll figure this out together." For a moment, they just sat there, holding hands, both of them lost in the intensity of the moment. It was a connection that went beyond words, beyond the differences in their species or the complexities of their situation. It was a connection of the heart, one that had grown slowly, naturally, and now there was no turning back. But as the euphoria of their mutual confession began to settle, reality started to creep in. Zinnia's responsibilities, her position as alien Miss Universe, and the expectations of her people loomed large in her mind. How could she reconcile her growing love for Ethan with the duties she was bound to fulfill? How could she, a symbol of unity and diplomacy, embark on a relationship with a human, something that was still taboo on so many planets? As if sensing her internal conflict, Ethan gently released her hand, his expression turning serious. "I know this won't be easy," he said, his voice filled with understanding. "We come from different worlds, literally, and there are a lot of challenges ahead of us. But I believe that what we have is worth fighting for. Don't you?" Zinnia met his gaze, and in that moment she knew that he was right. What they had was rare, precious, and it deserved a chance, no matter the obstacles. She nodded, her resolve strengthening. "Yes," she said firmly. "It is worth fighting for." Ethan smiled, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But then, as if the universe was determined to remind them of the complexities they faced, Zinnia's communicator chimed, pulling them back to the reality of their situation. She sighed, reluctantly pulling away from Ethan to check the message. It was from her advisors on Zalera, a reminder of a conference call she was scheduled to attend later that day with the Galactic Council. The Council wanted an update on her progress on Earth, and more importantly, they wanted to discuss the possibility of her entering into a diplomatic marriage, a union, that would strengthen ties between Zalara and another powerful planet in the galaxy. Zinnia's heart sank as she read the message. The timing couldn't have been worse. Here she was, on the cusp of something beautiful with Ethan, and now she was being reminded of the duties and expectations that awaited her back home. It was a stark reminder that her life was not her own, that she was bound by obligations that went beyond her personal desires. Ethan watched her closely, concern etched on his face. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. Zinnia looked up at him, her expression conflicted. It's just a reminder of the responsibilities I have," she admitted. "There's a lot expected of me, and they want me to consider a diplomatic marriage." Ethan's face fell, but he quickly masked his disappointment with understanding. "I see," he said quietly. "I know this is complicated, Zinnia. I don't want to add to your burden." Zinnia reached out, taking his hand again. "You're not a burden, Ethan," she said firmly. "You're the one thing in my life right now that feels right. I need to figure out how to balance everything. I don't want to lose what we have, but I also don't want to neglect my duties." Ethan squeezed her hand, his expression gentle. "I understand. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. Just know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Zinnia felt a surge of gratitude and affection for the man sitting beside her. He was everything she had ever wanted: kind, understanding, supportive. But the path ahead was far from clear, and she knew that whatever decisions she made would have far-reaching consequences. They spent the rest of the morning in the garden, talking about everything and nothing, savoring the quiet moments they had together. But the weight of their situation hung over them, a reminder that the world outside their little sanctuary was waiting, with all its complications and challenges. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they reluctantly made their way back to the embassy, where Zinnia had to prepare for her call with the Galactic Council. The mood between them was somber, but there was also a sense of determination and unspoken agreement that they would face whatever came next together. The call with the Galactic Council was as formal and rigid as Zinnia had expected. She sat in a conference room, her expression calm and composed, as she listened to the council members discuss the political situation in the galaxy and the potential alliances that could be strengthened through marriage. They spoke of duty, of responsibility, of the greater good, all while Zinnia's mind kept drifting back to Ethan, to the way his hand had felt in hers, to the warmth of his smile. When the topic of her potential marriage was finally broached, Xenia felt a chill run down her spine. The council members spoke of a powerful planet that was eager to forge an alliance with Solera, and how a marriage between Xenia and the planet's leader would solidify that bond. They didn't ask her what she wanted, they simply laid out the expectations, the benefits, and the potential consequences of refusing. Xenia listened in silence, her mind racing. She knew the stakes were high, that her decision would have far-reaching implications for her people. But the thought of entering into a marriage of convenience, of sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of duty, filled her with a sense of dread. When the call ended, Xenia sat in the empty conference room, her thoughts a tangled web of duty and desire, of responsibility and love. She knew she couldn't avoid the decision forever, but for now, she needed time to think, to consider her options, to weigh the consequences. Ethan was waiting for her outside the conference room, his expression filled with concern. Xenia looked at him, and for a moment she felt the overwhelming urge to run to him, to let him hold her and tell her that everything would be okay. But she resisted, knowing that the situation was far more complicated than that. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle. Xenia nodded, though the weight of the decision she faced was heavy on her shoulders. "I'm fine," she said, though the words felt hollow. "It's just, there's a lot to think about." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to make any decisions right now," he said softly. "Take your time, Xenia, and whatever you decide, know that I'm here for you." Xenia felt a lump form in her throat, and she nodded, grateful for his support. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. I just need some time to process everything." He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll be here when you're ready." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Xenia standing alone in the corridor, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision that lay ahead. For the rest of the day, Xenia retreated to her quarters, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. She knew what was expected of her, but she also knew what she wanted, and for the first time in her life, those two things were at odds. She spent hours pacing the floor, replaying her conversations with Ethan, the words of the Galactic Council, and her own feelings over and over in her mind. She knew she couldn't delay the decision forever, but the thought of choosing one path over the other filled her with a deep sense of dread. As the day turned to night, Xenia finally made her way to the balcony, where she stood looking out at the city below. The lights of the city twinkled like stars, a reflection of the infinite possibilities that lay before her. But despite the beauty of the scene, Xenia's heart was heavy. She thought of Ethan, of the connection they shared, of the love that had begun to bloom between them. It was a love that felt real, that made her feel more alive than she ever had before. But it was also a love that was fraught with complications, with responsibilities that went beyond just the two of them. And then she thought of her people, of the expectations that had been placed on her since the day she was crowned Alien Miss Universe. She had been raised to believe that her duty came first, that her personal desires were secondary to the greater good. But now, standing on the precipice of a decision that would change the course of her life, she couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to have both to fulfill her duty while also following her heart. As the night wore on, Xenia knew that the time for decision was drawing near. She couldn't avoid it forever, and the longer she waited, the harder it would become. But as she stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the city lights, she also knew that whatever choice she made, it would be one that she could live with, because it would be made not out of obligation, but out of love. And with that realization, Xenia felt a sense of peace settle over her. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges she couldn't yet foresee. But she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with courage, with strength, and with the knowledge that love, true, genuine love, was worth fighting for. And in that moment, as she gazed out at the world that had become so dear to her, Xenia knew that her journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. The days following Xenia's decision were filled with a sense of mounting tension, both within herself and in the world around her. Her relationship with Ethan, which had blossomed in the quiet moments they shared together, was now threatened by the realities of their vastly different lives. The pressure from the Galactic Council weighed heavily on her, their insistence on a diplomatic marriage becoming more urgent with each passing day. Yet, amidst the growing storm, Xenia found herself clinging to the connection she had forged with Ethan, determined to find a way to make it work. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The media frenzy began almost as soon as Xenia's feelings for Ethan became apparent. A leaked report from within the Galactic Council revealed that the alien Miss Universe was romantically involved with a human of fact that sent shockwaves through both Earth and the intergalactic community. Suddenly, Xenia and Ethan were thrust into the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny, their every move watched, their every word dissected by the media and the public alike. Xenia's communicator buzzed incessantly with messages from her advisors on Zalera, all of them expressing concern about the growing scandal. They warned her of the political fallout, of the damage this relationship could do to her reputation, and to the diplomatic efforts between Zalera and other planets. They urged her to reconsider, to focus on her duty and abandon this ill-fated romance before it was too late. But Xenia's heart was resolute. She had made her choice, and she wasn't going to back down. She refused to let fear dictate her life, to let others tell her who she could and couldn't love. Yet, even as she held fast to her decision, the weight of the situation began to take its toll. Ethan, too, found himself caught in the crossfire. His quiet, unassuming life was suddenly turned upside down as the media descended upon him. Reporters hounded him at work, outside his home, and even during the brief moments of respite he managed to steal away with Xenia. His colleagues looked at him differently now, some with envy, others with suspicion. The once comfortable environment of his laboratory had become a battleground, where he constantly had to defend his relationship with Xenia against the criticisms of those who couldn't understand why someone like him would be involved with someone like her. One afternoon, after another exhausting day of dodging reporters and fielding concerned messages from her advisors, Xenia found herself alone in her quarters at the United Earth Embassy. She stood by the window, looking out at the city that had once felt so full of promise, now clouded by the weight of the decisions she had made. Her heart ached with the longing to return to those simpler days with Ethan, when it was just the two of them exploring the wonders of Earth, free from the expectations and judgments of the outside world. The chime of the doorbell interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway. His face was drawn, his eyes tired, and Xenia felt a pang of guilt at the toll this was taking on him. He had never asked for this, never wanted to be thrust into the spotlight, but he had stood by her, unwavering in his support. Ethan, Xenia said softly, a small, sad smile on her lips. "You look exhausted." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I could say the same about you," he replied, his voice tinged with concern. "How are you holding up?" Xenia sighed, leaning against the window frame. "It's been difficult. The pressure from the council, the media, it's more than I anticipated. But I'm not giving up, Ethan. I can't." Ethan crossed the room and took her hands in his touch grounding her in the midst of the chaos. "We'll get through this, Xenia," he said firmly. "But if it's getting too much, if you need to step back." "No," Xenia interrupted, shaking her head. "I won't step back. I won't let them dictate how I live my life. But I worry, Ethan. I worry about what this is doing to you. You didn't ask for any of this." He smiled softly, his thumb gently caressing the back of her hand. "Neither did you. But we're in this together, remember? I'm not going anywhere." His words filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in days, a reminder of why she had fought so hard to keep their relationship alive. But even as she held on to that feeling, the reality of their situation loomed large in her mind. The pressures they faced were immense, and she knew that things would only get more difficult from here. As they stood there, lost in each other's presence, the doorbell chimed again, breaking the moment. Xenia frowned, reluctantly pulling away from Ethan to answer it. When she opened the door, she found herself face to face with one of her most trusted advisors, Lyra, a tall, regal woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. "Ambassador Xenia," Lyra said, her tone formal, but there was an undercurrent of urgency in her voice. "May I come in?" Xenia nodded, stepping aside to allow Lyra to enter. The advisor's presence in her quarters was unexpected, and Xenia felt a knot of unease form in her stomach. Once inside, Lyra cast a quick glance at Ethan before turning her attention back to Xenia. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low. "In private." Xenia hesitated, glancing at Ethan, who gave her a reassuring nod. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'll give you some space." He left the room, but not before giving Xenia's hand a gentle squeeze, a silent reminder that he was there for her, no matter what. Once he was gone, Xenia turned to Lyra, her expression serious. What's going on? Xenia asked, her voice steady despite the unease swirling within her. Lyra didn't waste any time. The Galactic Council is growing impatient, Xenia. They're concerned that your relationship with Dr. Brooks is becoming a liability, not just for you but for the entire diplomatic mission. There are rumors spreading across the galaxy. Factions forming that could destabilize the peace we've worked so hard to maintain. Xenia's heart sank. She had expected resistance, but she hadn't anticipated that her relationship with Ethan would have such far-reaching consequences. What are they asking of me? She asked quietly. They want you to end the relationship, Lyra said bluntly. They believe it's the only way to salvage your reputation and prevent further political fallout. They're also urging you to move forward with the diplomatic marriage. It's the best way to secure the alliance and restore confidence in your leadership. Xenia felt a wave of anger and frustration wash over her. So they want me to sacrifice my happiness, my love, for the sake of politics. Lyra's expression softened slightly, though her voice remained firm. Xenia, I understand how difficult this is for you. But you have to consider the bigger picture. Your role as Alien Miss Universe carries immense responsibility. Your actions have consequences, not just for you, but for your people and the entire galaxy. Xenia turned away, her mind racing. She knew Lyra was right, but the thought of ending things with Ethan, of giving up the one person who made her feel truly alive, was unbearable. She had spent so long fulfilling the expectations of others, putting duty above her own desires. But now, faced with the prospect of losing Ethan, she found herself questioning everything. Is there no other way? Xenia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lyra hesitated, her expression conflicted. There may be, but it would require you to take a significant risk. If you choose to make your relationship with Dr. Brooks public, to stand by him despite the Council's objections, it could change the course of history. But it could also lead to severe backlash, even war. Xenia's breath caught in her throat. The weight of the decision before her was almost too much to bear. She knew that whatever choice she made would have far-reaching consequences, not just for herself and Ethan, but for the entire galaxy. Do you truly believe that love is worth such a risk? Lyra asked, her voice gentle now, as if she could sense the turmoil within Xenia. Xenia turned back to face her advisor, her heart pounding in her chest. Yes, she said with quiet conviction, I do. Lyra studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then you must prepare yourself for what comes next. The Council will not take this lightly, and there will be those who will seek to undermine you at every turn. But if you truly believe in this, then I will stand by you. Xenia felt a rush of gratitude for Lyra's support, though it did little to ease the weight of the decision she had made. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she couldn't allow herself to be swayed by fear. Love, true love, was worth fighting for, and she was prepared to face whatever came her way to protect it. After Lyra left, Xenia found herself once again alone in her quarters, the magnitude of her decision settling heavily on her shoulders. She knew she needed to speak with Ethan, to tell him what she had decided and to prepare for the storm that was about to descend upon them. She found him in the embassy's gardens, sitting on the same stone bench where they had shared their first confession of love. The sight of him, his head bowed in thought, filled her with a mix of love and sorrow. She hated that she was about to burden him with the consequences of her decision, but she knew he deserved to know the truth. Ethan, she said softly. And he looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of concern and hope. What's going on, Xenia? He asked, his voice gentle. You look troubled. Xenia sat beside him, taking a deep breath to steady herself. I've made a decision, she said quietly. I've decided to make our relationship public, to stand by you, no matter what the Council or anyone else says. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Xenia, are you sure about this? You know what kind of backlash we're going to face. I know, she replied, her voice steady. But I can't let fear dictate my life. I've spent too long doing what others expect of me, putting duty above my own desires. But this, what we have, it's worth fighting for. I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me. Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. I'll stand by you, Xenia. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. His words filled her with a renewed sense of strength, and she nodded, feeling more certain of her decision than ever before. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way, guided by the love they shared. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as Xenia prepared to make her announcement. She knew that once she went public with her relationship with Ethan, there would be no turning back. The Galactic Council would be furious, and there was a very real possibility that she could lose her title, her status, even her place on Zalera. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the truth, the love that had grown between her and Ethan, and the belief that love true, genuine love could transcend the boundaries of species, culture, and tradition. On the day of the announcement, Xenia stood before a gathering of intergalactic media representatives, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan was by her side, his presence a steadying force as they prepared to face the world together. "Thank you for coming," Xenia began, her voice calm and clear despite the nerves that churned within her. "I have called this press conference to share an important announcement, one that I believe will have far-reaching implications for the future of our galaxy." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, taking in the expectant faces of the journalists and officials who had gathered to hear her speak. "As many of you know, I have been serving as Alien Miss Universe, representing my people and fostering peace and understanding between different species. It has been an honor to hold this position, and I have always strived to fulfill my duties with grace and integrity." Xenia took a deep breath, glancing at Ethan before continuing. "However, during my time on Earth, I have come to realize that there is more to life than duty and responsibility. I have found something here that I never expected, something that has changed me in ways I cannot fully describe. I have found love." The room erupted into murmurs of surprise and speculation, but Xenia remained composed, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "The man I love is Dr. Ethan Brooks, a human scientist who has shown me the beauty of this world and the depth of the human spirit. Our love may be unconventional, even controversial, but it is real, and it is strong." She paused again, allowing her words to sink in. "I know that this announcement will be met with resistance, even anger, from some quarters, but I believe that love, true love, knows no boundaries. It transcends species, culture, and tradition. And it is for that reason that I am standing here today, ready to face whatever challenges may come. Because I believe that our love is worth fighting for." As Xenia finished speaking, the room fell into a stunned silence. The implications of her words were vast, and the reactions from the gathered crowd were a mix of shock, disbelief, and in some cases quiet admiration. But Xenia didn't care about the opinions of others. What mattered was that she had spoken her truth, that she had taken a stand for what she believed in. Beside her, Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his, a gesture of solidarity and love. It was a small thing, but it meant the world to Xenia. In that moment, she knew that no matter what happened next, they would face it together. The aftermath of the announcement was immediate and intense. The media frenzy escalated to new heights, with headlines screaming about the scandalous relationship between Alien Miss Universe and a human. Political figures from across the galaxy weighed in, some condemning the relationship as a betrayal of duty, while others cautiously supported Xenia's call for a more inclusive and accepting future. On Zalera, the Galactic Council was furious. They issued a formal statement expressing their deep disappointment in Xenia's actions and strongly urging her to reconsider her decision. There were even rumors that they were considering stripping her of her title, a move that would have profound implications for her future. But Xenia remained resolute. She had made her choice, and she would not back down. With Ethan by her side, she felt a strength and determination she hadn't known she possessed. Together, they would weather the storm, no matter how fierce it became. As the days turned into weeks, the controversy surrounding their relationship continued to dominate the news cycle. There were protests on some planets, calls for boycotts, and even threats against Xenia and Ethan. But there were also messages of support from individuals and groups who believed in the power of love to transcend boundaries and bring about change. Through it all, Xenia and Ethan leaned on each other, drawing strength from the bond they shared. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew that they were not alone. Their love had sparked something larger, a movement towards greater acceptance and understanding between different species, a movement that was gaining momentum despite the resistance it faced. In the midst of the chaos, Xenia received an unexpected message from Lyra. The advisor, who had always been a steady presence in her life, had been working behind the scenes to rally support for Xenia's cause. She had reached out to influential figures across the galaxy, urging them to reconsider their views on interspecies relationships and to support Xenia in her quest for a more inclusive future. Lyra's efforts were beginning to pay off. A growing number of planets and organizations were publicly declaring their support for Xenia and Ethan, calling for a new era of tolerance and unity. It was a small but significant victory, one that gave Xenia hope that they were on the right path. But there were still many challenges ahead. The Galactic Council remained a formidable obstacle, and there were powerful factions that were determined to see Xenia's relationship with Ethan ended, no matter the cost. The threat of war, though still distant, loomed on the horizon, a reminder of the high stakes involved. As Xenia and Ethan prepared for the next phase of their journey, they knew that the fight was far from over. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the growing support of those who believed in their cause. Together, they would continue to stand up for love, for unity, and for the belief that a better, more inclusive future was possible. And so, as the stars shone brightly in the night sky, Xenia and Ethan looked towards the future with hope and determination. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were ready to face it together. For love, true, genuine love was worth fighting for, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to protect it. The moment had come. The Galactic Council, the governing body that presided over the affairs of the galaxy, had summoned Xenia to a special session. The location was to be a place of great significance, the Celestial Assembly Hall, an ancient and imposing structure located on the neutral planet of Orianis. This was where the most critical decisions affecting the galaxy were made, and now Xenia was to stand before its members and defend her actions. As the day approached, the weight of what was to come settled heavily on Xenia's shoulders. The Celestial Assembly Hall was a place where history had been shaped, where wars had been averted and alliances forged. But it was also a place where individuals had been brought to account, where decisions had been made that changed the course of countless lives. Xenia knew that this would be one of those moments, one that would determine not only her future, but also the future of her people and, perhaps, the galaxy itself. Ethan insisted on accompanying her, despite the risks. He knew that his presence might provoke the council, but he also knew that Xenia needed his support now more than ever. Together they boarded the sleek silver spacecraft that would take them to Orianis, the journey long and filled with a tension that neither of them could shake. As they neared their destination, Xenia stared out the window at the vastness of space, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. She had prepared herself as best as she could, knowing that the council would not go easy on her. They would challenge her, question her motives, and likely try to intimidate her into submission. But she also knew that this was her chance to speak her truth, to stand up for what she believed in, and to make a case for a future where love transcended boundaries. When they arrived at Orianis, the sight of the Celestial Assembly Hall took Xenia's breath away. The structure was massive, carved from the pale, shimmering stone of the planet's surface. Its spires reached towards the sky, adorned with intricate carvings that depicted the history of the galaxy, the rise and fall of empires, the struggles for peace, and the great leaders who had shaped the cosmos. The hall itself was surrounded by vast, manicured gardens filled with flora from countless worlds. It was a place of beauty and serenity, yet there was an undercurrent of power that Xenia could feel as soon as she stepped out of the spacecraft. This was a place where decisions of immense consequence were made, and today she would be at the center of it all. Xenia and Ethan were greeted by a delegation of officials, who escorted them into the heart of the assembly hall. The interior was as grand as the exterior, with towering pillars and sweeping arches that seemed to defy gravity. The walls were lined with banners representing the various member planets of the Council, each one a reminder of the diverse and complex galaxy that Xenia sought to unite. As they were led through the labyrinthine corridors, Xenia felt a surge of anxiety. She had faced many challenges in her life, but nothing like this. The council chamber, where the meeting would take place, loomed ahead, a vast, circular room with a domed ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. The chamber was filled with representatives from all corners of the galaxy, their faces a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases outright hostility. At the center of the chamber was the speaker's podium, where Xenia would stand and address the council. It was a place of both honor and scrutiny, where every word, every gesture would be analyzed and judged. Xenia took a deep breath as she approached, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Ethan's presence beside her, a steadying force that gave her the strength to face what was to come. The chamber fell silent as Xenia stepped up to the podium. The members of the council, seated in a ring around her, watched her with a mix of anticipation and judgment. Among them were some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, leaders of planets, influential diplomats, and respected elders. Their expressions ranged from stern to curious, but all eyes were on Xenia. The Speaker of the Council, an imposing figure with deep-set eyes and a voice that echoed through the chamber, spoke first. Ambassador Xenia of Zalera, you stand before this council to account for your actions. You have been accused of disregarding your responsibilities, jeopardizing interplanetary relations, and engaging in a relationship that some consider a threat to the stability of the galaxy. Do you understand the gravity of these accusations? Xenia nodded, her voice steady despite the tension she felt. I do, Speaker. Very well, the Speaker continued. You have been given this opportunity to address the Council, to explain your actions and the reasons behind them. The floor is yours. Xenia took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the Council members. She could see the doubt in their eyes, the skepticism that had followed her ever since her relationship with Ethan had become public. But she also saw something else, a glimmer of hope, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, some of them were open to what she had to say. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, Xenia began, her voice clear and unwavering. I stand before you today not only as the representative of Zalera, but as someone who believes deeply in the values of unity, peace, and love. These values have guided me throughout my life and have been the foundation of my service as Alien Miss Universe. It is because of these values that I am here today to speak on behalf of a love that transcends the boundaries we have imposed upon ourselves. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. I know that my relationship with Dr. Ethan Brooks has caused concern, even outrage, among some of you. I understand that it challenges long-held beliefs and traditions, that it disrupts the status quo. But I believe that this disruption is necessary because love, true love, is not bound by species, by culture, or by tradition. It is a force that unites us, that brings us closer together, and that has the power to create a better, more inclusive future for all of us. There was a murmur of response from the council members, but Xenia pressed on. I am aware of the expectations placed upon me, of the responsibilities that come with my title. I have always taken those responsibilities seriously, and I have always strived to act in the best interests of my people and the galaxy. But I cannot, in good conscience, abandon the person I love for the sake of political expediency. To do so would be to deny a fundamental part of who I am, and I believe it would be a betrayal of the very values that this council was founded upon. Xenia could see that her words were having an impact, though the response was far from unanimous. Some members of the council looked thoughtful, others skeptical, and a few downright hostile. But there was a shift in the atmosphere, a sense that she was beginning to reach some of them. The galaxy is vast, Xenia continued, her voice growing stronger. It is filled with countless species, cultures, and ways of life. But despite our differences, we are all connected by our shared existence in this universe. We are all part of the same tapestry. And it is our diversity that makes us stronger. By embracing that diversity, by accepting love in all its forms, we can create a future that is more just, more compassionate, and more united. She paused, taking a deep breath before delivering her final argument. I ask you not to judge me based on tradition or fear, but to see the possibility of what could be. To envision a galaxy where love is not constrained by arbitrary boundaries, but is celebrated as a force that can bring us together. I stand before you today not just as a representative of my people, but as a person who believes in the power of love to change the world. As Xenia finished speaking, the chamber fell into a heavy silence. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from contemplative to conflicted. It was clear that her words had struck a chord, but whether it would be enough to sway them remained to be seen. The Speaker of the Council leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Xenia. You speak with great conviction, Ambassador, he said, his voice measured. But you must understand that the decisions made by this council are not based on emotion alone. We must consider the implications of your actions for the stability of the galaxy, for the relationships between planets, and for the future of intergalactic diplomacy. Xenia nodded, her expression solemn. I understand, Speaker. But I believe that stability and progress are not mutually exclusive. We can have both if we are willing to embrace change. The Speaker regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the other council members. We will now deliberate on the matter before us. Ambassador Xenia, you and Dr. Brooks will be escorted to a private chamber while the council reaches its decision." Xenia's heart sank, but she kept her composure as she nodded and allowed herself to be led out of the chamber by a pair of officials. Ethan followed close behind, his presence a reassuring anchor in the midst of the storm that was brewing around them. They were taken to a small, dimly lit room, furnished with a simple table and chairs. It was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the council chamber, and Xenia found herself pacing the floor, her mind racing with possibilities. She had done everything she could, but now the decision was out of her hands. Ethan watched her with concern, finally stepping forward to take her hand and pull her into a gentle embrace. "You were incredible, Xenia," he murmured against her hair. "No matter what happens, you stood up for what you believe in. That's all anyone can ask for." Xenia clung to him, drawing strength from his presence. "I just hope it's enough," she whispered. "The stakes are so high, Ethan. I don't know what I'll do if—" "Hey," Ethan interrupted, pulling back to look her in the eyes. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You've already shown them how strong you are, how much you care. And no matter what decision they make, that doesn't change who you are or what we have." Xenia nodded, her heart swelling with love and gratitude for the man who had stood by her through everything. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out," he replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching into what felt like an eternity. Xenia's mind replayed her speech over and over, scrutinizing every word, every gesture. Had she done enough? Had she said the right things? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she forced herself to remain calm, to focus on the love that had brought her to this moment. Finally, after what felt like hours, the door to the chamber opened, and one of the officials stepped inside. His expression was neutral, giving nothing away. "The council has reached a decision," he said simply. "Please follow me." Xenia and Ethan exchanged a tense glance before following the official back to the council chamber. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation. The council members were seated in their places, their expressions carefully guarded. The speaker stood at the center, his gaze focused on Xenia as she and Ethan took their places before the podium. "Ambassador Xenia," the speaker began, his voice resonating through the chamber. "After careful deliberation, the Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding your actions and your relationship with Dr. Brooks." Xenia held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "We recognize the passion and conviction with which you have spoken today," the speaker continued. "Your words have challenged us to reconsider long-held beliefs and traditions. However, we must also consider the stability and unity of the galaxy as a whole." Xenia's stomach churned with anxiety. This was the moment that would determine everything. "The Council has decided that, while we do not condone your actions, we also acknowledge the importance of love and unity in fostering peace. Therefore, we will not strip you of your title or your position as Ambassador of Zalera." Xenia felt a wave of relief wash over her, but the speaker wasn't finished. "However," he said, his voice taking on a firmer tone, "there are conditions. You will be allowed to maintain your relationship with Dr. Brooks. But you must work to ensure that this relationship does not disrupt the delicate balance of interplanetary relations. You will also be required to participate in a series of diplomatic missions designed to promote understanding and acceptance of interspecies relationships across the galaxy." Xenia blinked, the weight of the Council's decision slowly sinking in. It was not the outright rejection she had feared, but it was also not the unconditional acceptance she had hoped for. It was a compromise, one that would allow her to keep her position and her relationship with Ethan, but with the understanding that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. "Do you accept these terms, Ambassador?" the speaker asked, his gaze piercing. Xenia exchanged a glance with Ethan, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. Then she turned back to the speaker, her voice steady as she replied, "I accept." The speaker inclined his head. "Very well. The Council will be watching your progress closely, Ambassador. We expect you to uphold the values of unity and peace that you have spoken of today. This is your chance to prove that love can indeed transcend boundaries, but it is not a responsibility to be taken lightly." Xenia nodded, her heart filled with a mix of emotions, relief, determination, and a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Speaker," she said sincerely. I will do everything in my power to honor this responsibility." With that, the session was adjourned, and the council members began to file out of the chamber, their expressions varying from contemplative to resigned. Xenia and Ethan stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the decision settle over them. Finally, Ethan turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. "Well, it's not exactly what we were hoping for, but it's something." Xenia nodded, a smile of her own forming. "It's more than I expected, honestly, and it's a chance to prove that love really can make a difference." Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. "And we'll do it together, just like we always have." Xenia squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with love and determination. "Yes, we will," she said softly. "Together." As they left the Celestial Assembly Hall, the weight of the galaxy's expectations still heavy on their shoulders, Xenia knew that their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and obstacles that they could only begin to imagine. But with Ethan by her side, she felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. They had been given a chance to show the galaxy that love, in all its forms, was a force to be reckoned with. It would not be easy, but Xenia was determined to make the most of this opportunity. She would work tirelessly to promote understanding and acceptance across the galaxy, to break down the barriers that divided them, and to build a future where love was celebrated, not feared. And in the end, she knew that love, true, genuine love, would prevail. It had brought them this far, and it would carry them through whatever trials lay ahead. For Xenia and Ethan, this was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, determination, and the unwavering belief that love could, indeed, change the world. The weeks following the Galactic Council's decision were a whirlwind of activity. Xenia and Ethan found themselves thrust into the center of a movement that was rapidly gaining momentum, a movement that sought to redefine the boundaries of love and unity across the galaxy. The Council's decision, though cautious, had given them a platform, and they were determined to use it to the fullest. Their first mission was to visit the planet Saren, a world known for its rich cultural heritage and strong ties to tradition. Saren was one of the planets that had expressed the most concern about Xenia's relationship with Ethan, and the Council had chosen it as the first test of their new diplomatic efforts. The mission was to promote understanding and acceptance of interspecies relationships, a task that would be far from easy given the conservative nature of Saren's leadership. As their spacecraft descended through the atmosphere of Saren, Xenia looked out at the planet below, her thoughts a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Saren's surface was a patchwork of lush forests, sparkling lakes, and sprawling cities, each one a testament to the planet's long history and deep-seated traditions. The capital city, Eldara, where they were to begin their mission, was a stunning blend of ancient architecture and modern innovation, with towering spires that reached towards the sky. Ethan, sensing Xenia's tension, reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "We've got this," he said with quiet confidence. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Xenia smiled, grateful for his unwavering support. "I know," she replied softly, "but I can't help feeling like this is going to be one of our biggest challenges yet." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It might be. But if anyone can change minds and hearts, it's you, Xenia. You've already done so much just by being yourself." The spacecraft touched down in the heart of Eldara, where they were met by a delegation of Saren's officials. The leader of the delegation was a tall, stern-looking man named High Chancellor Meles, whose reputation for upholding tradition was well known throughout the galaxy. His expression was unreadable as he greeted Xenia and Ethan, but there was a coolness in his demeanor that did not go unnoticed. "Welcome to Saren, Ambassador Xenia, Dr. Brooks," Meles said formally, his tone polite but distant. "We are honored to have you here as our guests." "Thank you," High Chancellor Xenia replied with a gracious smile. "We are honored to be here and look forward to learning more about your beautiful world." Meles inclined his head, though his gaze remained cautious. "We have arranged for a series of meetings and events during your stay, which will give you an opportunity to engage with our leaders and citizens. We hope that your visit will be productive." The subtext was clear. Meles and his government were skeptical of Xenia's mission, and they would be watching closely to see how she conducted herself. It was a challenge, one that Xenia was determined to rise to. The first event on Saren was a formal dinner with the planet's ruling council, held in the Grand Hall of the Eldara Palace. The hall was a masterpiece of architecture, with vaulted ceilings adorned with intricate carvings and chandeliers that cast a warm, golden glow over the room. The walls were lined with tapestries that depicted scenes from Saren's history, each one a reminder of the planet's deep-rooted traditions. Xenia and Ethan entered the hall together, their presence drawing the attention of every guest in the room. The eyes of the Serenian leaders were upon them, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Xenia felt the weight of their scrutiny, but she kept her head held high, determined to make a positive impression. The dinner was a lavish affair, with courses that showcased the best of Serenian cuisine, exquisite dishes made from local ingredients, each one a work of art. As they ate, Xenia engaged in polite conversation with the council members, discussing everything from trade relations to cultural exchanges. But she knew that the real test would come after the dinner, when she would have the opportunity to address the council directly. As the meal drew to a close, High Chancellor Meles rose from his seat, signaling the start of the formal discussions. The guests fell silent as Meles turned to Xenia, his expression serious. "Ambassador Xenia," he began, his voice carrying the authority of his position, "we have heard much about your recent actions and the decision of the Galactic Council regarding your relationship with Dr. Brooks. Many on Saren view these developments with concern, as they challenge the values and traditions that have guided our people for generations." Xenia listened intently, her expression respectful. She had expected this line of questioning, and she was prepared to respond. Meles continued, "We do not wish to disrespect the decisions of the Galactic Council, but we must also consider the impact of these changes on our own society. Our people are deeply connected to our traditions, and any shift in those traditions must be approached with caution." Xenia nodded, her tone thoughtful as she replied, "I understand your concerns, High Chancellor. Tradition is important, and I respect the values that have shaped your society. But I believe that tradition and progress are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist, and when they do, they can create a future that honors the past while embracing the possibilities of the present." Meles' expression remained impassive, but there was a flicker of interest in his eyes. "And how do you propose we achieve such a balance, Ambassador?" Xenia took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "By opening ourselves to new perspectives, by listening to the voices of those who seek to expand the boundaries of our understanding. Love is one of those forces that defies simple categorization. It is not bound by the limits of tradition or the constraints of custom. It is a force that unites us, that brings out the best in us, and that challenges us to grow." She paused, allowing her words to resonate before continuing. "I am not asking you to abandon your traditions or to change your beliefs overnight. What I am asking is that you consider the possibility that love, in all its forms, can be a bridge between our differences. It can be a way to connect us across cultures, across species, and across the vast distances of the galaxy." The room was silent as the council members absorbed Xenia's words. She could see the wheels turning in their minds, the seeds of doubt and curiosity taking root. It was a small victory, but it was a start. Meles nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Your words are wise, Ambassador. Perhaps there is merit in what you say. But words alone will not be enough to convince our people. They must see the benefits of this new perspective for themselves." Xenia nodded in agreement. "I understand, High Chancellor, and I am willing to work with you to demonstrate how love and unity can strengthen our societies, not weaken them. It is not about choosing one over the other. It is about finding a way to bring them together." The discussions continued late into the night, with Xenia and Ethan engaging with the Serenian leaders on a wide range of topics. The atmosphere was still cautious, but there was a sense of openness that hadn't been there before, a willingness to consider the possibility of change. The following days were filled with meetings, public appearances, and cultural exchanges. Xenia and Ethan traveled across Saren, visiting schools, community centers, and cultural sites, where they spoke with ordinary citizens about their mission. They listened to the concerns of the Serenian people, addressing their fears and answering their questions with patience and understanding. At each stop, Xenia emphasized the importance of unity and respect for diversity. She spoke of the value of learning from one another, of the strength that comes from embracing different perspectives. And slowly she began to see a shift in the attitudes of those she met. People who had been skeptical or even hostile at the beginning of her visit were now more receptive, more willing to engage in dialogue. One of the most significant moments came during a visit to a Serenian temple, a place of great spiritual importance to the planet's people. The temple, with its towering columns and intricate carvings, was a symbol of Saren's ancient traditions and deep-rooted beliefs. It was here that Xenia faced one of her greatest challenges, a meeting with the High Priestess Alara, the spiritual leader of Siren and a staunch defender of the planet's traditions. Alara was a formidable figure, with a presence that commanded respect. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to see into the very soul of those she encountered. As Xenia and Ethan were ushered into the inner sanctum of the temple, where Alara awaited them, Xenia felt a sense of both awe and apprehension. Ambassador Xenia Alara greeted her, her voice soft but filled with authority. "I have heard much about you and your mission. It is said that you seek to challenge the very foundations of our traditions." Xenia met Alara's gaze with respect. "I do not seek to challenge, High Priestess. I seek to expand to show that love and unity can be powerful forces for good, even within the framework of tradition." Alara regarded her for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. "And do you believe that love is stronger than tradition, Ambassador?" Xenia considered her words carefully. "I believe that love and tradition do not have to be at odds. Tradition gives us roots, a sense of identity and belonging. Love gives us wings, the ability to connect with others in ways that transcend boundaries. Together, they can create a balance that honors the past while embracing the future." The High Priestess remained silent for a moment, her gaze never leaving Xenia's. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You speak with wisdom, Ambassador. Perhaps there is truth in what you say. But change is not easy, especially when it challenges the beliefs that have guided us for generations." "I understand that," Xenia replied earnestly, "and I do not expect change to happen overnight. But I believe that by opening our hearts and minds to the possibility of love, in all its forms, we can create a future that is richer and more inclusive." Alara's expression softened slightly, and she gestured for Xenia and Ethan to sit with her. "Tell me more about this future you envision," she said, her tone more open now. For the next hour, Xenia and Ethan spoke with the High Priestess about their vision for a galaxy where love and unity were not just ideals but guiding principles. They discussed the challenges they had faced, the resistance they had encountered, and the hope that had kept them moving forward. By the time they left the temple, Xenia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The meeting with the High Priestess had been a turning point, one that signaled that change, while slow, was possible. As their time on Siren came to an end, Xenia and Ethan were invited to attend a public gathering in Eldara's central square, where they would have the opportunity to address the people of Siren directly. The square was a vast, open space surrounded by the city's most important buildings, and it was filled with thousands of Sirenians who had come to hear them speak. Standing on the raised platform at the center of the square, Xenia felt a surge of emotion as she looked out at the crowd. These were the people she had come to connect with, the people whose hearts and minds she hoped to reach. People of Siren. Xenia began, her voice clear and strong. "I stand before you today as someone who believes deeply in the power of love to bring us together. I know that my relationship with Dr. Ethan Brooks has raised many questions, and I understand that it challenges the traditions you hold dear. But I ask you to consider the possibility that love, in all its forms, can be a force for good, a force that unites us rather than divides us." She paused, letting her words resonate with the crowd. "Our traditions are important. They give us a sense of identity, a connection to our past. But we must also be willing to embrace the future, to open our hearts and minds to new possibilities. Love is one of those possibilities. It is a force that transcends boundaries, that brings out the best in us, and that challenges us to grow." Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady as he added, "Love is not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding a way to bring different perspectives together, to create a future that honors our diversity while celebrating our shared humanity. Xenia and I believe that by working together, by listening to each other, we can build a future where love and unity are the guiding principles of our galaxy." The crowd was silent, their expressions thoughtful as they listened to Xenia and Ethan's words. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began to spread through the square. It was hesitant at first, but it grew in strength until it became a wave of support, a sign that the people of Siren were beginning to open their hearts to the message of love and unity. As the applause washed over them, Xenia felt a sense of triumph. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The seeds of change had been planted, and she knew that, with time and effort, they would grow. After the gathering, High Chancellor Maylis approached Xenia and Ethan, his expression more open than it had been at the beginning of their visit. "You have given us much to think about, Ambassador, he said, his tone respectful. Siren will always honor its traditions, but perhaps there is room for new ideas as well. Xenia smiled, grateful for his words. Thank you, High Chancellor. That's all we can ask for, a willingness to consider new possibilities. Melis nodded, and for the first time there was a hint of a smile on his lips. Safe travels, Ambassador Xenia, Dr. Brooks. May your journey continue to bring positive change to our galaxy. As Xenia and Ethan prepared to leave Saren, they felt a sense of accomplishment. The mission had been challenging, but it had also been rewarding. They had faced resistance, but they had also seen the beginnings of a shift towards a more inclusive and accepting future. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be more planets to visit, more leaders to convince, and more challenges to overcome. But Xenia and Ethan were ready. They knew that they were not just fighting for their own love, but for the love and unity of all beings across the galaxy. As their spacecraft lifted off from Saren, Xenia looked out at the planet below, her heart filled with hope. This was only the beginning. There was so much more to do, so many more hearts and minds to reach. But she knew that, with Ethan by her side, they could achieve anything. Together they would continue to stand up for love, for unity, and for the belief that a better, more inclusive future was possible, and in the end, they knew that love, true, genuine love, would prevail. It had brought them this far, and it would carry them through whatever trials lay ahead. For Xenia and Ethan, the future was bright, filled with the promise of new beginnings and endless possibilities. They were ready to embrace it, to face whatever challenges came their way, and to build a galaxy where love was celebrated, not feared. And as they soared through the stars, their hearts filled with hope and determination, Xenia knew that they were not just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for a new era of love, one that would change the galaxy forever.